How you doing, folks? Welcome to another podcast of Mark Talks To. And as you know, we've had a lot of different people on this show. We've had entrepreneurs, people who have founded multi-million pound businesses and sold them. We've had royalty. We've had a bishop. But now we have something that, in a lot of ways, is unusual. A lot of people see it as very sexy. How do I do this? We have a movie TV producer, which I'm excited about. But hands up, this chap, his name is Barry Germansky. I know Barry very well because Barry's brother is married to my daughter, so we know each other extremely well. And I'm very grateful for Barry doing this and giving up your time. So thanks very much, Barry, for doing this. And Barry's in Canada, so
That's right.
so there's a big time difference. It's 3 o'clock for Barry in the afternoon, and it's 8 o'clock for me in the evening. So there's a time difference. So how are you,
That's
Barry?
right. I'm doing well, and thank you for having me on your show. How's the future doing? Because you're technically in the future.
Well, yes. So if that was really true, I'd be telling you what shares to buy and sell.
Yes.
We could make a lot of money. But producer, the one thing I just tell a bit about Barry. Barry's a producer, and he's done things like TV series. One Day in October. He's been the executive producer of Riff Raff with Ed Harris and Bill Murray, and which was or is still one of the most viewed movies on Amazon Prime Canada. He also did The Cleaner. He was executive producer on The Cleaner with Clive Owens and Daisy Rigby. And then the other one, which I liked, that this is A-level stuff. He did Marlowe, am I saying that right? With
Yes.
Liam Neeson from up the road and Diane Kruger. So before we get into mixing with all those A-listers, Barry, there's a lot of people probably wonder that would love to get into your type of business. First of all, what made you want to get into producing movies and why go down that road?
Well, I've always been passionate about film ever since I was a little kid. And I've also always been passionate about writing. And I first was a screenwriter, and then I became what I like to call an accidental businessman, and I transitioned into producing. I still write, I always will continue writing, but the reason why I decided to start producing is so that I could understand how productions are actually assembled. And that way, when it came to my screenwriting, I could reverse engineer some of my projects. So, for example, I wouldn't write something that was too grandiose that could not be produced because it would require too many resources to make.
Big money. In other words,
Yes.
if you wrote the wrong thing, you're looking at 100, 200 million type stuff. And
Well,
and
potentially these days, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah. But unless you're doing it on an iPhone. But tell me,
Yeah.
for people who want to know, what does a movie or a TV series producer do? Like, what is your core set of skills, and what do you do?
Well, one of the most important things is you have to be able to manage a variety of different things all at once, because there are many moving parts to a film or a television show. And basically, a producer usually has to come in early in the life of a project, and he has to nurture the project. So, for example, he can option a screenplay and then start attaching talent, let's say a director, actors, and then also simultaneously be looking for money to pay for everything. So that's initially what a producer usually does. And there is no right or wrong answer, by the way, to your question.
Yeah,
There are many different things that a producer could choose to do or not do. But usually, at an initial stage, a producer is nurturing a project into existence from the very beginning. And then, as the project develops, eventually he has to manage the production once you're actually shooting. And basically, the producer has been responsible prior to that to hiring many of the different department heads and many other individuals. And then he becomes a manager, so to speak, and has to manage the production. And he stays with the film well into post production. And then after post production, when the film's being distributed, he has to arrange for the sale often to a distributor. he will work with a sales company or a distribution company outright. There's many different things that could happen, but basically that's just a very broad overview of what a producer could do.
Right. So, and just for the people who live on TikTok, listen on TikTok, folks, we're talking to Barry Germansky, a movie and TV producer. So, from listening to you, Barry, you really are an entrepreneur. That each project is new. Where an
That's right.
entrepreneur starts a new business and puts the marketing together and the sales department and the IT department, and then has to sell it to the public. You're doing the same job, but it's just a different industry. Is that right?
Yeah, you could basically say that. And of course, because it's an artistic industry, there are all sorts of you know, odd variables that come into play because, works of art are often.
Give us an example. Give us a nod without naming names.
Well, like in a very general sense, let's just say, for example, someone is an architect or an engineer and they're designing something that has been designed many times before, and there are certain, let's say, mathematical or scientific principles to follow, and then you'll get a guaranteed or almost guaranteed result. In the film business or in television, that's not the case. So, like for example, if someone designs a bridge, unless it's like a super high tech new design, relatively speaking, people who design bridges know how to design bridges.
Which is yes.
There are so many different prior blueprints to consult. With a work of art, technically anything can happen, and even introducing, let's just say, an actor to a project who may or may not fit a certain role can change the trajectory of the project in all sorts of different ways. Because sometimes, let's say, an actor is miscast, but that's just one of countless things that could happen,
Exactly. You're
right?
right. And the same with running a business. And when you got into this, and I know the answer, but I'm asking you, like, it wasn't an easy thing to get into. You had to start off with small productions, didn't you?
Yes. And first, I mean, look, I used to write picture books when I was, let's say, like 4 years old. I would take the cardboard from cereal boxes so that I could have a hardcover for my book, and then I would fill it with, regular sheets of paper.
Yes.
So I was always a writer. And then by, let's say, the time I was 12, I wrote my first screenplay. And then, just I kept writing and kept writing. And eventually I actually decided to be a playwright because I thought, and this is when I'm in university now, and
Yeah.
during the summers when I wasn't in school, I would, put on plays. I decided that would be a cheaper thing to do than make a film, but that's actually not the case necessarily, because I went to New York City and rented black box theaters, so 99 seat theaters, which are very expensive, and that's a
I imagine
relatively
they are,
small.
yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is it's a transient experience, meaning unless you actually record the production, which you don't always do, once it's finished, the run of the play, it's gone. I mean, obviously you have the actual text that people can, follow in the future
But yeah.
forevermore. But I mean, the actual production that was paid for is no longer in existence. So I decided that I should go back to pursuing film. I will still go back to theater, and I still have a drawer full of plays that I have. But yeah, basically, I decided that it would be a better use of my resources to make independent films because at least they would last forever, and then they could have a greater reach, right? Because it can be
Yes.
distributed across different platforms. With a play that's taking place, let's say, for a month in a black box theater, there's just a limit to how many people can come to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And with a movie, if it hits the right audience and
Yes.
actually in a way goes viral, then it could actually become a huge hit, hitting a big
Yes.
audience. And like I know you're big into movies, and I know if you talk about any movie or throw a movie at you, you'll tell me who's starred in it, who's been in it, all that type
Yeah.
of stuff. Like you. I mean, I like
Yeah.
movies, but you're really you know stuff
Yes.
going back a long time, which is fantastic. We both like a lot of the
Yeah.
old stuff and stuff like that. But so was. was that one of the reasons too? Your love of movies and your love of seeing this art in place and happening, like seeing the likes of all the old Cagney movies and Stuart James Stewart and John Wayne and Dean Martin or whatever who it is. Were they the type of things that sort of lit the fuse for you to get you going on the road you're on?
Well, yes, because this is just my own personal preference, but I actually prefer old Hollywood to new Hollywood, even though my favorite film director of all time is Steven Spielberg. So he's actually an exception to this general
He's
rule of
new.
mine.
Well, he's
Yeah.
new, but yeah, but he's out of the box. He's one of those people
Yes.
that when you talk about building bridges, he just does things different.
Yes. But generally speaking, I prefer the aesthetic of let's say pre-1970s movies when to my mind, there was more aesthetic diversity. By that, I mean you could have black and white movies, you could have color movies. Then
Yeah,
within the realm of color, you could have Technicolor, different types of color emulsion processes. So you could have just so many different types of um, movies in terms of the way they look and also in terms of even acting styles. So that specifically speaks to what you're talking about in terms of acting styles, right? There was at first a more histrionic theatrical type of acting that came from theater, and then over time things became more naturalistic. But it's funny that even when you look at actors like James Dean, Montgomery Clift, and Marlon Brando, who are supposed to be the ones who ushered in naturalism when it comes to acting on film, um, they are highly stylized. Like in other words, by today's standards, they're still pretty expressionistic, if you want to use that term. They're larger than life. They're not you know, literal minded actors in many ways.
yeah,
So it's just
yeah.
interesting to see that.
And when you look at like when people like you're doing well-known movies now and you're getting well-known actors, which must be a big draw as well. So when you're getting people sending you scripts or project ideas, what are the key things you're looking for them in those projects or those scripts that will light the fuse for you to say, right, I can raise some money for this. I know I can get the people involved. This is doable.
Well, there are so many different variables that come into play. If it's somebody that I'm already a friend of, or if it's someone that I admire, then obviously there are already relationships that get, you know, forged, and then that can lead to a collaboration because we're of like mind and we want to create something together. And then when it comes to just looking, let's say, at scripts that may come from anywhere, I just you know, basically have to be attracted to what the story is. And if I think that I have the resources or I can cobble together the resources to make that thing a reality, to get it off the ground, to materialize it as some tangible thing, right? That's basically the general process that goes on in my mind when I'm considering a script. And then, of course, I'm also trying to get my own scripts produced,
Yes.
which you know, I've already done to a certain extent. Like for example, I did a Canadian TV series called A Tippling Adventure, and that was broadcast on a Canadian television channel called Bell 5. And I have many screenplays of mine that I am actively developing. It's all a question of which actors can I attach, which director can I attach. Eventually, I want to direct. I've directed in the past, small things, but if I'm not directing, I have to find a director. So I also have to consider, is the screenplay in question something that I can find a director to direct? And then also, because usually you have a director before you'll have actors attached, but there
Right.
are no
Okay.
rules in the film business or in the arts in general, so anything can happen. But usually you will have a director first because when you start reaching out to actors, they're going to want to know who's directing.
Right. So if the right
Yeah.
director's in place, so we've seen that for like the Bond movies and the Mission Impossible movies and the big franchises.
Yes.
That if the right director with the right name and
Yes.
credentials and skills behind him or her is in the project, it will automatically draw other actors in who want to be part of it.
That's right.
Yeah. So and is that your ultimate goal then to basically direct bigger and better movies? Is that where you see yourself going?
Well, I will at some point direct. bigger movies. Right now, though, I've mainly produced bigger movies,
Yes.
which is a good thing, in my opinion. I mean, again, everybody's different. For example, some people wouldn't want to produce under any circumstances, right? Like, in other words, the individual in question has to want to produce and or be able to produce.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so it's
also,
not some.
the producing, a part of producing is making those phone calls looking for the money.
That's right. And not just looking for money, but also looking for all sorts of resources. You have to find locations, you have to find equipment, and where can you get the best deals to get your equipment? Because everything's expensive. And then
Yeah.
also, like right now, for example, I'm working with a director and he wants to shoot his movie on film as opposed to digital. And, that's a whole other can of worms because to shoot on film today, we have fewer labs that develop film, right? So you have to have a lab nearby, preferably, because otherwise you're going to have to ship the literal film to some other location. It's going to take time. It's going to be problematic
And
potentially.
is that now dearer to shoot and film than digital?
Um, well, it is also subjective too, right? And also depending on the circumstances, it actually could be more expensive to shoot something on digital if you're using very high tech digital equipment.
Yes.
But usually it is going to be more expensive to shoot on film because there's added steps and also because you can only process the film at certain labs, like I said before. Plus, you're going to need usually better lighting equipment because you need stronger lights in order to have a proper effect on film. It's an emulsion process film. Now, I will also just say that personally, I prefer the look of film
Well, you
to
would, because you
digital.
love the old movie, so you would.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Because the thing is, film is actually less perfect, so it's more imperfect than digital. But the
Yeah.
imperfection of film, thanks to many things, including the photochemical emulsion process, that actually, in my opinion, makes the image uh, richer. So, like for example, there's a higher gradation, so you can see, for example, one color gradually um, sort of bleed into another. So it has the effect of looking at, let's say, a painting, and for example, the shadows will be richer, and if there's a vibrant color, depending on the circumstances, it will be more vibrant on film.
Yeah.
Uh,
And, and isn't that one of the reasons why, because technology, it's funny how technology is getting better and better and better, but
yeah,
yet, even in the music industry, people are going back to vinyl because they
that's
want the
right.
imperfection. They want to hear the bit of the crackle. They don't want to
Yeah,
hear it 100% perfect. They want to
that's
hear
right.
like the real studio, the real outdoor show, the real how I felt on the day. And
That's
you're
right.
saying film gives you that as well.
Correct. And also to use an analogy, at a certain point in the history of painting, painters were obsessed with realism, which we can debate whether it was actually ever realism. I mean, in my opinion, reality is always divorced from any type of work of art, right? Art
Yeah.
is its own thing. But the point is, there was a time, let's say in the 19th century and even in the early 20th century, where certain painters were focused on so-called realism. And then there were painters, for example, like Picasso, who basically went in the total opposite direction partly because they were rebelling against that strict fidelity to reality. They wanted to create something that the camera in particular couldn't duplicate. So all of a sudden, you actually have a return to, let's say, what these modernist painters would call, primitivism. So, like for example, Picasso drew inspiration from African masks because he wanted to create an abstracted view of humanity. And so when you look at some of his later paintings, well, even some of his early ones, it depends which period you're looking at. But the point is, he's mostly well known for his
Yeah.
semi-abstract, fragmented cubist paintings. So that's just another way of looking at it. So, in other words, this has happened in other mediums like painting.
Yes.
Where when realism became too omnipresent on the cultural landscape, painters decided to shake things up and do things that were weird, you know?
Yeah, and different. And like being a
Yeah.
producer, you really are and multitasking across the board. Because I
Yes.
assume when you're the executive producer, you know where every penny is going and where every penny is allocated. So,
Yes.
so, so you're watching that budget hourly, daily, whatever. Because I
Yeah.
would say it's very easy to spend money very quickly.
It is, and often what you have to do, I shouldn't even say often, it's almost always. Well, no, I should never say that something is like always 100% happening. But usually what you're going to do is you're going to have a production accountant who is also going to assist you. So it's not going to be just you single-handedly.
Yeah.
But obviously, at the end of the day, as either a producer or executive producer, you are going to have to look at the nitty-gritty. You're going to have to know where the money's coming from, where it's going, and how it's being spent. But yeah, you're going to deal with a production accountant. You're going to deal with lawyers. You're going to deal with a line producer who's going to help create an itemized, detailed line budget. Um, and many other people. So, yes, you do have to multitask, which is why I said before that not everyone would even want to produce
Yeah.
because a lot of people, they're going to hear what I just said. They're going to say, I don't want to do that. Like, it's boring, even. They might think that some of this is boring, right? So that's just something that you have to be prepared for if you are interested in producing. You do have to have the talent or skill set, however you want to define it, to be able to multitask. You have to be able to wear multiple hats,
Yeah.
and sometimes at the same time, you know?
And make decisions. And
Yes.
we get to the stage now where like it must feel good to have the likes of Liam Neeson, Clive Owens, Ed Murray, Ed Harris, and Bill Murray being involved in your projects. That
Yes, of
like
course.
because
Because
these are people that will probably you saw on the big screen, you be heroes
that's
of
right.
different movies, and now they're part of your projects. Like, how does it
Yes.
feel when you land them?
It's amazing. I mean, for someone like me, it is truly magical to work with people that you've always admired, especially when you were a kid growing up. So, like for example, forget about all the other things that I love about Marlowe, because I'm a huge Raymond Chandler fan, and a huge fan of the Humphrey Bogart uh, detective movies, including The Big Sleep. But
Yeah.
just to have Liam Neeson film that I was a part of was a huge thing for me because if I have to pick a single favorite movie, it's probably Schindler's List. So here's Schindler himself, you know.
Yeah, in
So
your
yeah, that's
movie.
cool. Yeah, exactly. So just for and by the way, another producer who worked on the film with me is Gary Levinson, and his my favorite of his films, that's how I should say it, is Saving Private Ryan. And
Oh,
Saving
right,
Private Ryan is
okay.
all yeah, so there were many people on that film who I greatly admired and have greatly admired for a long time. So it was a dream come true just to be able to be on the same project with them,
Yeah,
for sure.
and bring all them and bring all them together. And I must mean now
Yes.
going forward that because you have these A-listers on your list of movies you produce and all, does it make it easier when you make that phone call looking for money?
Yes,
It
it
does.
does. Yeah. Yeah, like so for example, I have every week people reaching out to me, seeing if I can help them produce their work, raise money for their stuff. Um, and that happens more frequently as time goes on because they're looking at the movies that I've already done. They're, let's say, checking me out on IMDb, and that must be how they're finding me, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Or they're looking at some other database because there's multiple film databases,
There
and if
is,
my
yeah.
name is on any of these movies, they're going to try to reach out to me. And sometimes I actually do respond to the people that reach out to me. It really just depends on what the project is that they're submitting. But then beyond that, whenever I want to produce something else, a new project, and I'm initiating the new project, yes, it helps to show people, whether it's a writer or a director or whoever it may be, here are my previous movies. They were distributed, like you said before, riffraff. for a period of time last year. It was the second most watched film in Canada on Amazon Prime. So that
which is
also looks
fantastic,
good.
which is amazing, which is
Yeah.
like huge, huge. Yeah,
Yeah. So that all helps, of course.
yeah,
That stuff. And the other thing is, the way I look at it, this is beyond just the business side of what I do. Because if it was only about business, I wouldn't be doing it, right? My passion is for film and the arts as a whole. So that's why I'm in this lane to begin with.
yeah,
So, what I love to do is basically just leave a record behind, establish a legacy, so to speak, or not even so to speak, an actual legacy of things that I was a part of, so that I'm now a part of this tradition that I am passionate about, right? That I have an
yeah.
encyclopedic knowledge of. So that
And,
to me is
and
so
you really
rewarding.
you do have and you really do have a encyclopedia knowledge of it, and yeah, it must be rewarding, yeah, because being involved in an industry that you love is one thing, but producing stuff and directing stuff in that industry that is there for other people coming up to look at
Yes.
must be fantastic as well.
100%. And the other thing too is a work of art has a life of its own. So once it exists, once it's out there, forevermore, people are going to encounter it, and each individual is going to have his or her own interpretation of the work in question. So, there's never been a movie that is loved by everybody, and there's never been a movie that is hated by everybody. That's just
Yeah,
how it works, you
yeah.
know?
It's why people give out about movies and some people
Yeah,
love them. Yeah,
yeah,
like you look at Love Actually. We love that in this house because it
yeah.
starts off Christmas. Other people hate the movie, so like everyone has their favorite. So like your
Yeah.
favorite, like for someone who loves movies,
Yes.
what would you class as your top one or two movies of all time?
Well, that's a very good question to ask me because I obsess over that question all the time. I have a Jeffersonian appetite for list making. And what I mean by that is Thomas Jefferson used to make lists of his favorite, you name it, right? So he had a favorites list for like every occasion. And I do the same thing. I have a list of favorite movies, list of favorite books, a list of favorite scientists, on and on, So, my list of favorite films is gigantic. It has I haven't actually calculated how many individual titles are on it because I have giant clumps. So like for example, in first place is 87 titles. Second place is 111 titles. You see, that's how my list works. I can't say to you, this is my 37th favorite movie. I can't do that
So
because to
you
me,
can't pick one. You can't.
if I had to pick a single favorite movie, it would be Schindler's List because I think that it's the most philosophically significant film ever made because, among other things, it was able to transcend the crisis of representation surrounding the Holocaust. For years after the Holocaust, many philosophers, Jewish and not Jewish, had said, like, basically, can there be poetry after Auschwitz, right? Can art even exist anymore in the way that we used to know it? Because we've now experienced the worst that humanity has to offer. The Enlightenment, for example, brought us to the Holocaust. Of course, I would
Mm,
argue that it was actually Hitler's rejection of the Enlightenment that partly led to the Holocaust,
yeah.
right? He was into pseudoscience and the occult and you name it. If you've
Yes.
seen Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Yeah.
you
I was
get
going to say that. Yeah.
a satirical representation of that, and that's also one of my absolute favorite films. But so aside from that one title that I mentioned, other favorites that are in my top uh, grouping, and again, I
Yeah.
have so many groupings, include, I'll try to do it in chronological order as much as possible. So the early Marx Brothers movies,
Yes.
including Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, Duck Soup. Then I would also say some of the Universal Studios horror films. So Frankenstein, Dracula, Bride of Frankenstein. If I had to pick a single favorite Universal Studios monster movie, it would be that. The Wizard of Oz. Um, I would also say The Ten Commandments, Vertigo, Psycho, um, Jason and the Argonauts. I love Ray Harryhausen. The Graduate, The Hospital, Network, Alien, um, The Right Stuff, the Indiana Jones trilogy. I love the original trilogy.
Yeah.
I think it's my favorite trilogy for all sorts of reasons. I think that the melting Nazis at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark is the ultimate revenge fantasy in
It,
film history.
it
Uh,
is, yeah.
uh,
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah. And then I would also, and then just a few others. So I said Schindler's List, but I will also add Empire of the Sun, Saving Private Ryan,
Yeah, fantastic
and
movies.
yeah, and a bunch of others. But like I said, that's just the top rung. Then I've got many others. So there's hundreds at the very least. I don't have a numerical value assigned to each title, so I don't know how many there are in total. It could be
Right,
over a
okay.
thousand. There's definitely hundreds, though. There's for sure
Yeah.
hundreds on it.
And you do have it like when you look at a movie, unlike other people who like would look at a
Yeah,
movie and remember who maybe the top two, three, four actors are, you remember the director, the
yeah,
producers, the writers, the copywriter. You know the full lot.
that's right.
360.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've memorized, like, for example, every Best Picture winner. I do things like that. And by the way, initially, it was a good thing to be able to do that because it helped me just watch many movies. So, in other words, I wanted to know what were all the Best Picture winners
Yeah.
and
Yes.
then what were the nominees each year as well. And that actually just was an educational experience because it was a way of seeking out movies that I hadn't seen before, right?
Right. And
Especially,
then probably
yeah.
you probably looked at those movies then to see why they didn't win and why they did win and
Yeah, and it's
what
all subjective, of course. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
know it is, but some of them probably have a rhyme or reason, even
that's
with the
right.
actors and even the way they were filmed and put together. Like this, there's some that we all have seen that nearly in some way follow a certain format that always do well.
Yeah, that definitely happens because to some extent, the Academy is a political organization, right? So
Yeah.
whatever's trendy at a given moment ends up having a boost. But again, it's all subjective, so it's hard to say anything definitively here. But sometimes the movies that I think genuinely deserve to win do win. But it could just be incidental or accidental.
And you
So,
think that's going to change now, Barry, because now YouTube are going to be hosting the Oscars, right? I think it's from next year. I think
yes.
after. Do you think like what's going to win and what's going to be trending is going to make a big impact now on the people who pick those movies? Because now, like YouTube, like it hits millions and millions and millions upon millions of people every single day in all shapes of
Yes.
genres, all shapes. And do you think that's going to make a difference on who's going to be winning and what movies will be trending?
It very well could because there's probably going to be an emphasis on selecting nominees who are in vogue,
Yes.
like just based on what social media trends dictate.
Yeah.
Like for example, at the Golden Globes, they created a new category that honors a movie because of how well it did at the box office, which to me doesn't make much sense, because
Yeah.
the box office receipts speak for themselves. So I don't know why you have to give an award to the
Or the
movie
best
that
box
did
office.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really understand that too much, other than it helps lure in people who want to see certain movies being honored. But the thing is, it's interesting because I personally tend to prefer movies that are more mainstream. To me, the distinction between an art house film and a mainstream film is very artificial and arbitrary. I think most of the greatest movies ever made were to some extent mainstream, and they can be just as sophisticated as a so-called art house film. So, for example, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo or Psycho,
So
I
yeah.
think each one of those movies is just as sophisticated, just as revolutionary as the most avant-garde um, art house film. And in fact, I actually think they're more sophisticated and more revolutionary. Because often what will happen is art house films will be more abstract. And when you have too many abstract variables floating around in a work of art, it actually ends up canceling the work of art out. Because
Yes.
if like for example, to use Psycho as a counter to that, that movie is one of the best structured movies I've ever seen, but it also represents true chaos because the very succinct narrative structure is splintered so severely at several key moments, including, of course, the shower scene where
Yeah,
the
yeah,
protagonist gets eliminated, right? So, like, what could be more radical than that? But the thing is, because the movie isn't totally abstract, and because you are following this very well-structured narrative, when the splintering occurs, you really feel it. Whereas if you have a movie that's just all over the place from the get-go, it's hard to convey chaos because you're with chaos the whole every step of the way.
yeah. You are.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So, well, thanks very much for joining us today. And just say to people if people need to look at your stuff,
Yeah.
is the TV series One Day in October, is that live now? Is that
It's
on?
on HBO Max in the United States. Other countries, see what happens is, and this isn't just for television, it's for film as well. Often you will have a sales company that will sell the work in question to different territories. Different territories have different companies. And so you won't, for example, often get one company to distribute the work in
Oh,
every
worldwide.
territory.
Right, okay.
Just to give you an example, Marlowe, when it was released on Blu-ray in the United States, Universal actually released the physical Blu-rays. In Canada, it's a different company. It's a Canadian company. Um, and then, of course, in some countries, they didn't even have a Blu-ray or DVD release.
Yeah,
And then to give another example, Riff Raff was not released in Canada on Blu-ray, but it was released in Blu-ray in Germany. And that's because different
okay.
companies are handling the rollout of the film, as depending on the territory. So I think that's
Right,
interesting.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So if anyone's looking for your movies, like we have Riff Raff, we have The Cleaner, we have
Yeah.
Marlowe, we have the TV series One Day in October. And what other ones of yours should people look out for?
Well, I also did a movie with Dustin Hoffman called As They Made Us. It was directed by Mayim Bialik, who actually hosted Jeopardy. Before that, she was on The Big Bang Theory. So that movie's you can find it on various platforms. Um, and there's also a documentary I did on Hurricane Katrina called Forced Change. That's available. And if you just go on IMDb, you'll see my other projects. I have that Tippling Adventure television show. And there's many things that I'm now working on, which will be announced soon. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, if you look on IMDb, you'll be able to find my,
Get all your stuff.
complete list. And then also sometimes there are press releases. So for example, if you just search my name on Google, you'll see press releases for movies that I produced or executive produced. And if you look at certain press releases, they'll also mention where the movie is currently uh, streaming, or in some cases, if it's in theaters. Because Riff Raff was released in theaters in the United States. Marlowe was actually released in theaters all over the world, including Ireland.
It was, yeah.
And yeah, and in fact, Michael, at one point, his local multiplex was playing it, so
That's
he
right.
didn't have to go far. Yeah, he didn't have to travel far. It was like at the Swords Mall, right? So,
Yeah, that's right. And
yeah,
I remember correctly, I saw it flying to the States
yeah, it was also on airplane. It was on Aer
on,
Lingus. That's right.
on Aer Lingus. Yes, yeah. So yeah,
That's right.
Michael saw it here, and I saw it on Aer Lingus on the flight. That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So brilliant. So Barry, thanks so much for your time. And it's great that you can just throw out names like Dustin Hoffman, Liam Neeson, Ed Harris, people who years ago you would have loved the opportunity to throw those names out. And now
Yes.
you can do that, which is a credit to all the work you're doing and the fantastic stuff. So thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And don't forget, folks, this is available on YouTube and is also available on the podcast Mark Talks. So just put my name in anywhere you get your podcast and it will come up. And don't forget, we've got a massive amount of stuff on podcasts. So our morning show, about 30 or 40 episodes alone of that, just on YouTube and on the podcast. Barry, have a great day. You're
Hey,
still
you
having
too,
your
and thank
day.
you.
I'm going into my evening. I was going to say I'm going to have
Yes.
a glass of wine, but it's Thursday. I'm not allowed to drink on a Thursday. I have to wait till Friday.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, and I'll talk to you again very soon.
Okay, bye for now.
Take care.